You're watching Fugitive Red Eye, and welcome to another anime review. Today I'm reviewing the anime series Umineko When They Cry. There will be spoilers ahead, so you have been warned. Umineko When They Cry is part of the When They Cry series, along with Higurashi, although the two have almost nothing to do with each other. In fact, the only connections they have is they do show clips of Higurashi on the TV within Umineko when the characters are watching it, so that would lead me to believe that the two don't actually exist in the same universe, or if they do, it's kind of meta. And the other similarity is the characters do die over and over again, similarly to Higurashi. So I'm going to start with a brief synopsis of the plot, because I don't think many people are as familiar with Umineko as are with Higurashi, because Umineko is a lot more obscure, I feel. So the basic plot to Umineko is there's an old man who's dying and wants to give his inheritance to his family. However, he made a deal with a witch many years ago, and that involved the gold which is in his inheritance. Well, his whole family gathers on the island to discuss the inheritance, and the witch wants to get revenge and resurrect herself to a physical form. And to do that, she has to make several sacrifices, so the characters begin dying off, and it becomes sort of a murder mystery for the first arc. After the first arc, everyone has died, and Battler, who is the main character, is the only one who refuses to accept his death and accept that a witch was the cause of it. I think it's weird that everyone else just accepts it and wants her to resurrect since she's the one who killed them, and I think Battler is the only sensible one here. Perhaps the only unsensible thing about him is he denies witches when they're right in front of him doing magic. But the reason for that is if he doesn't acknowledge them, they can't use their full potential and she cannot fully resurrect. So the two end up playing in a game. The point of the game is he has to explain the murders in a logical way that doesn't involve magic, while she tries to prove that it is magic, and it goes back and forth, and they have a total of 4 games where they replay the same murders in different ways. That's pretty much the plot synopsis to it. It's a very meta show because they keep going in and out of the game to this little room where Battler and Beatrice, who's the witch, are sitting and talking back and forth and playing this game. But that's all I'm going to say about the plot for the time being. I will mention the ending later in my analysis, because it is part of one of my analysis points. So, let's go ahead and be nice and start off with the things I liked. Like Higurashi, I liked the first arc because it was the most atmospheric. Unlike Higurashi, however, the subsequent arcs were not as awesome. Higurashi, at least all the arcs were good, and it was very satisfying. Which I know is kind of a criticism, but I'm kind of going to be going back and forth like that. I'll start off with what I like, and then I'll go on to expand on that point, and then later I will go on to the things I don't like. But anyway, another thing I liked is there was a lot of really good potential in some of the later arcs, especially, like the stuff with Maria and her abusive mother were amazing, but again, they fall a little bit short because, well, frankly, some of the character motivations are a bit off, and I'll get to that a little bit more later when I'm actually being a little more critical, but overall, those parts I really liked. And another thing I liked was Battler is a very interesting character, and he's probably one of the only characters in the show that I actually really liked, and again, I'll get to that. But Battler is really entertaining because he seems like kind of a smartass kind of guy who's also very clever, and I don't know, he has a lot of personality, and he's the only one who is willing to stand up to Beatrice, so I think that's kind of why he's entertaining to me, because everyone else is just like, oh, she killed us, she's a witch. I also really liked the intro and outro songs to this show. They fit it very well, and they were very cool. The whole murder mystery aspect of it, and I think it was, it had a lot of potential. So now I'm going to go get on to the parts I didn't like, which will of course include a few expansions, which may get into things I did, but anyway, so I briefly mentioned earlier that I didn't like some of the character motivations. None of them made any goddamn sense to me. For instance, there were these characters called the Seven Sisters of Purgatory that were Beatrice's servants, and for some reason Angie, who's one of Beatrice's enemies and actually Battler's sister, is able to summon them and she becomes friends with them, which I don't get. Why the hell are they so willing to work with her and be her friend when they're also against her brother with Beatrice? And another thing, they just kind of stop showing up after a certain point and only show up with Angie. I don't get it. And sometimes Battler seems like he's enjoying the game and having fun with it, and other times he's just pissed off at Beatrice for killing his family. He goes back and forth between enjoying it and being pissed. Which brings me to my next point I didn't like. The tone is super inconsistent in this series. The first arc is really atmospheric and again goes for the horror feel, just like with the first arc of Higurashi. However, unlike the first arc of Higurashi, there were no horror elements to the other arcs, and none of them had any suspense. Because, you see, with Higurashi, there was a mystery as to what was causing the death, what caused time to reset, but this, you know right from the start why time is resetting, because you see Battler and Beatrice playing this game back and forth. But another thing about the tone being inconsistent is sometimes they want you to hate Beatrice and think of her as this inhuman monster, and other times they try to make you feel sympathetic towards her. It makes no goddamn sense. And then they make you sympathetic towards the Seven Sisters of Purgatory, too, even though they're the ones who actually carried out the murders in, like, the first 2 or 3 arcs. Also, the old man is typically a sacrifice in the arc, but in the 4th arc, he's actually the one who wants everyone killed. I mean, he's always kind of the one who wants to do the game, but at first he's shown as an adversary to Beatrice. But then later on, he's like trying to work with to resurrect her. I don't get it. Why the hell did he suddenly change his mind in the final arc? And I hate that they tried to make you somewhat sympathetic towards the characters like Ava when she becomes a witch, because she kills everyone a lot more brutally than even Beatrice would. And, and then there's the characters like Virgilia and stuff, which are just inconsistent as all hell. I mean, I get that the whole thing they were trying to trick Battler, but it's just bizarre to me. Another thing I didn't like was most of the character designs kind of pissed me off, honestly. Like, all the humans, fine. But the problem is, a lot of the demon designs aren't very demon-like. For instance, the Seven Sisters of Purgatory are just these chicks in skimpy outfits. And all of their names are names for Satan, which is cool and all, but I don't know. I feel like they should have had female demon names. It would have made more sense to me. I mean, that's a very minor nitpick that I don't think anyone else will give a shit about, but it kind of bothered me to have a female named Lucifer, Beelzebub, and all that kind of stuff. But again, that's a very minor nitpick that isn't very important, but I don't like their designs. They're not very demonic. I also really hated those ones that had, like, the rabbit ears and stuff. I don't remember what they were called, but they all had the name Chiester and then a number. They were really fucking dumb, and I didn't like them. The only demon designs I actually liked were Ronave, the butler, because he kind of reminded me of Sebastian from Black Butler. And I also really liked the goat-headed demons. They were actually demonic-looking. Another thing I did not like was the plot is just all over the fucking place. It is way too convoluted. There are too many witches, it goes back and forth in tone way too much, and there's just so many things introduced that don't get utilized right. Like, okay, towards the end, they reveal that Battler's mother wasn't his mother, but then they never elaborate on who is, why that's important, or anything like that. They just bring it up and just sort of forget about it. It really pissed me off, because it got me curious. If he's not his mother's son, who is he? Is he his stepmother's son? Was there an affair, and that's what led to them getting divorced? I thought not, because I thought his mother died. And that's why it's so confusing. And then there's the final battle scene, which is pretty cool for the most part, I'll admit. But then the ending to it is a big fuck you to everyone who sat through the whole show. The ending to this show is what really killed it for me, because, you know, he actually beats the game and kills Beatrice, or at least it seems that way. But then, like, after he destroys her physical form, her, like, spirit floats out, and she's like, I'm going to kill you now if you don't beat me. And he's like, I'll defeat you no matter what. And then it cuts to the other two witches saying how they're gonna just continue the game for all eternity, etc. It really, really pissed me off. Like, he had her defeated, and then all of a sudden it's like, nope, they're gonna fight for eternity, and it's never gonna end. It really pissed me off because a lot of stuff happened that just got nullified and became useless, like the whole fact that Angie sacrificed herself for this, and my advice is to use a little bit of doublethink and pretend that it ends right when she gets stabbed through the heart and pretend that killed her. That's the only thing I can do to accept the ending, because everything else is fucking terrible about it. Okay, so now a little bit of an overall analysis of the show itself. First off, one other thing I do want to mention is that the characters don't interact with each other at all. Like, hardly anyway, except in the very first arc. Which, honestly, doesn't do it very well. Like, I mean, there's the whole Maria stuff with her mother, which, like I said, was really good, other than she has this really annoying stuffed lion character that I don't like, although he is kind of an important turning point in that arc, because Maria's mother rips him apart, and that's actually, you know, a sad moment. I actually felt pretty sad in that moment. And the problem is it just goes all over the place, and then Maria becomes very murderous, which actually I thought was done really well, because, you know, it's a sad progression from she's very sad about how her mother is and how she's never loved her, up until the point where she becomes homicidal and crazy. Unlike Higurashi, this plot is just too off the wall, because Higurashi, you know, even though the plot involves time resetting a lot and a bunch of kind of crazy shit that happens, it's all relevant, and it's fairly straightforward. Whereas this, I genuinely get confused half the time, because I don't know who's on what side, who's doing what, or why this is even happening. None of it makes any sense to me. I honestly think that the whole murder mystery thing would have been cooler if they would have stuck to either real-world logic, or had the witches killing everyone, but made it, mysterious and suspenseful. Hell, they could even have the time resetting thing like Higurashi, which it kind of does with the game, but honestly, and I actually liked the game parts. If they were just more consistent with the characters, those would have worked really well too. They also should only have 1 or 2 witches. Having, fucking 6 of them really pissed me off, but, I have very mixed feelings about this show. Overall, with the parts... So, character development in Higurashi may have been one of the parts I didn't like because, it was a lot of cutesy shit, but it was still character development, and it needed to happen. I would have done it differently myself had I written it, but it was still character development, and it still made you feel for the characters and understand how they feel about each other. There was pretty much no character development in Umineko. Incidentally, Umineko means seagulls, I think, or it's a way to say seagulls. So the translation of the actual full title of Umineko When They Cry is When the Seagulls Cry, just like Higurashi is When the Cicadas Cry. Back to my point, there's no character development, so you don't really feel for anyone except for Maria and Battler, possibly. The whole thing with George and Shannon is kind of sad, but then George is just like, I'd sacrifice everyone for Shannon. Well, fuck you, dude. Honestly, that really pissed me off, and that arc made no sense. I mean, the fight scenes were kind of cool, where they had George and Shannon fighting against 2 different demons, and then they end up killing each other, which I don't get. That test made no sense. They were trying to test their determination, but if their determination is to fight the demon, wouldn't that make them win? I'm so confused. And then there's the whole thing with Beatrice trying to find the Golden Land, which is really dumb, because it's shown that she's there with Maria, but yet she's still looking for it. So is this a fake Golden Land? Is she only able to stay there partially? Explain. I don't know. It makes no goddamn sense half the time. And this show had so much potential that it really underutilizes it, and it really makes me angry. I feel like that's part of the reason there's only been such a limited release of this show is because it's honestly not that great. It has a lot of potential, and it has a lot of great moments that I really liked. And I probably will rewatch it at some point, but, It's nothing like Higurashi, especially with that ending that was very unsatisfying and honestly is more like a cliffhanger. I don't know if they'd originally intended for another season, but honestly that was kind of very dumb and last minute. Now, I've never read the manga or played the visual novel, so I don't know if they're any better, but honestly, this whole thing made me very turned off about it. Higurashi is such a good series. Honestly, if I had to give it a number out of 1 to 10, I'd give Higurashi probably an 8.5 just because I don't like some of the cutesy stuff, and I don't like how, the whole time resetting thing became a plot point, but then I got used to it, and I actually started to like it. So, the cutesy shit in Higurashi is probably the only thing that really is a detriment to it. With this, I'd only probably give it about a 5, if that, and I like this series here and there. The problem is it just is all over the place in tone and with plot and with the way the characters interact. It makes no sense to me, and it really makes me angry. But I did still enjoy it for the most part, and there were a lot of scenes where I'm like, okay, the show's getting good, I might actually enjoy it. And then it would just be like, nope, we're not gonna stay good, fuck you. But anyway, that's my review of Umineko When They Cry. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Have you guys seen Umineko? Did you enjoy it, or do you agree with me with what I said? Do you think it had untapped potential, as I do? What's your thoughts on Higurashi? Do you think Umineko's better than Higurashi? If you do, what the hell's wrong with you? Anyway, this has been Fugitive Red Eye. Have a great rest of the day.